So I'd now like to invite Mike Rohde to the stage. We're going to have another quick conversation to sort of dig into Zero Trust, in particular, something that's been alluded to at different points today of how to build on the investments and the tools that are already there. And so the focus is about how to not start from zero on Zero Trust. So Mike, how are you?
Doing well, how are you?
So thank you for being here today. And Mike Rohde, I should say, is the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer for Federal for ServiceNow. And so obviously you've been thinking about the Zero Trust challenge on any number of levels longer than most. And can we sort of start with a baseline? You know, we've talked about the different guidance that's been issued here over the last year and a half. How does the cyber order and M2209 line up with your general understanding or definition of Zero Trust?
Yeah, well, thank you, Troy. So, Zero Trust to me, when I first started hearing about it years ago, was really this nebulous term, right? It was cloud services way back 15, 20 years ago. What is the cloud? Is this up in the air? Where's my data going? I felt that way a bit about Zero Trust as well. Then started kind of digging into it a little bit more, reading more and more guidance and understanding about it. I thought there were some great analogies here earlier today, specifically the one about getting access into a SCIF. And if you're trusted to get into the SCIF, well, you're trusted to go everywhere else within that particular SCIF. And in reality, no, we need additional protections. We need those additional gates across your devices, across your networks, and ultimately where your data resides. And so Zero Trust really started hitting home with me a little bit more. I think there have been some efforts that have done previously, things like the CDM program, that have built some foundations for implementing Zero Trust. But ultimately, it's going to be a journey. I don't think there's definitely not a silver bullet out there today. And anyone that does tell you that they've got a tool that can solve your Zero Trust problems, run as quickly as you can, because there's not one out there. But it's really going to be more of a combination of tools, combination of new technologies, and processes that evolve over time.
And do you think the guidance that's out there is evolving accordingly? Because I lumped it all together, but we've gone from sort of general statements of we should explore this to sort of reference guides that have been put out by CISO and by OMB, and now to very specific implementation plan requirements for agencies. Do you feel like what's being required is appropriate to get agencies to where they need to be?
It is definitely going in the right direction. Like I said, we talked about Zero Trust a couple years ago. It's a concept. Now, CISA just showed some very specific guidance and details of what the objectives are and what you're trying to achieve through Zero Trust. And I think between the government and the government, frankly, has been really a thought leader in this space. And a lot of times us in industry are looking at government, when we're protecting our corporate networks and understanding what we need to do, we're looking at the government for some of the latest and greatest guidance and capabilities that we should be looking at ourselves.
And one of the previous industry speakers today talked about how conversations have been changing with customers over the last several months. Are you seeing a shift in what federal organizations are coming to you for with regard to Zero Trust?
Yeah, a year ago it was, Mike, what can you do to solve my Zero Trust problem? And can ServiceNow take care of that for me? And while there's lots of things that we can do from an automation and orchestration perspective, no, there isn't that silver bullet. But again, with the more detailed guidance that's been coming out, agencies are getting smarter on this. The requirements to build out specific plans for their agencies on what their overall plan is going to be to implement Zero Trust. I'm absolutely seeing the agencies getting smarter and smarter on this.
And what sort of building blocks are already there? And I mean, you can sort of take talk to particular tools or services that you or others offer, but also in the sense of existing federal security programs. Like for agencies that are looking to leverage existing investments, what do you need to make sure is sort of part of your Zero Trust portfolio?
Sure. Well, I think CDM is a great building block for what agencies can leverage from a pre-existing, acquisition and tools that you have in place. I think there were some challenges initially with CDM, specifically around the idea of, hey, we're going to buy lots of tools. We're going to buy licensing for endpoint protection, DLP for vulnerability management. And what I think a major lesson learned there was you can have all the tools that money can buy, but if the tools aren't integrated together, if there's no communication across tools, then those tools are going to be very limited in what they can do. And that's one of the areas that we've been pretty successful in on the CDM side is, a lot of federal agencies have leveraged CDM to acquire, our ServiceNow platform to orchestrate and integrate these different tools. We integrate with all of the major security tools that are out there into a single pane of glass where you can create workflows where your vulnerability management systems, your vulnerability scanners will pop a critical vulnerability. And in the past, it was you got to go figure out, okay, who owns that device? Who do I need to contact to get a fix in place, to get a patch in place? Whereas if you've got that integrated tool, once your vulnerability scanner identifies it, you can kick off a workflow to get the team ready to install, test, implement a patch.
Now, I know when CDM was first kind of coming to real fruition, there was the challenge of, well, we've got to, we now have to do the CDM stuff. We already have our own security tools over here, and agencies had to learn to, figure out how to not have kind of, two solutions running in parallel and figure out how to integrate that. Are there similar challenges now with CDM and these zero trust efforts? Are there risks of having dueling solutions?
I do think so. There's not going to call anyone on stage, but there's many of us here that have talked today about tools, and a lot of our tools do integrate and work together. But there's a lot of products out there, and each of the products has a different niche to it. And I think it's really going to be imperative for the agencies to really do the research and understanding on what the different tools can do for you, what challenge they can solve. Don't let your vendor tell you, this is the challenge you can solve, or this is what I do, this is what we do. Really communicate what your problem statement is and what you're trying to achieve, and then you can really find the right tools that are going to work and that are going to integrate together.
And what about the, sort of going back to the guidance questions? I don't know how deeply you've dove into 2209, but the sort of revisions that OMB has asked agencies to make in their implementation plans. I'm wondering if there's an area that you think you were especially happy to see of a focus on a specific area or a call for more detail there.
Yeah, I think overall, some additional detail. As I stated, the guidance has gotten better for sure. But if you're an agency CIO, you're a CISO, and you haven't been diving into the space for several years, it's a big challenge. And the timelines that are out there, people don't understand that this is not meant to be. This needs to be up and running within this fiscal year. This is a journey, and this is going to be a lot of hits and misses. We're not going to have a perfect zero trust program, I would say, within the next 12 to 18 months. There's going to be some very good and very effective pieces to zero trust, but I think the call and the ask for more detailed guidance is good, it's helpful, and frankly, I'm looking at it from our internal corporate side and how we implement this. We've got our own corporate network, and we've got our network where our customer data resides, but we've got to look at this, and we're looking to the government for some guidance on it as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned that agencies are asking smarter questions. It's no longer, hey, can you give me zero trust in a box? But as they're coming to your organization, what are the sticking points? What specifically are they looking to you and your team to help them solve with Zero Trust?
So for us, it's really around the workflows and really around, ServiceNow is not going to come out there and solve your endpoint protection. We're not an identity access management solution. That's not what we do. However, where there's a workflow where they can automate something that was previously manual or that is currently manual, that's really where our discussions go. And most of the requests are around how can you make me more efficient with knowing that I've got less resources, less bandwidth, I've got more products and tools, but how can you help me optimize what I'm implementing and how I can get there?
And you mentioned automation, which is one of the kind of key cross-pillar functions in the CISO model. We'll come back again later to how many pillars there should actually be in these models. But how should agencies approach the automation piece of Zero Trust?
Yeah, I think really you got to look at what you have in place today and start attempting to automate anything you possibly can at this time. It's not a scenario where, hey, let me get all of my tools, my products in place, my processes in place, then let me start thinking about automating everything. It's take it piecemeal. Like I mentioned, the vulnerability management process. If you can automate the area of once you've identified a vulnerability to actual implementing a fix, if you can automate that to reduce the time that it takes to get that addressed, then do it today. That's gonna help you from a Zero Trust perspective. That's gonna help you from a security posture perspective today. So the way I look at it is whatever you've got in place today, look at ways where you can make some automation efforts, because then maybe you save on resources and you can spend those resources in other areas that require more manual intervention.
And when you see organizations pushing for automation, is the bottleneck not having the right automation tools or not having the data and processes there and ready to automate?
Both. So, I think a lot of times the tools are there. You've got the tools. It's just not necessarily realizing that there are ways to integrate these tools pretty effectively. But another key area though is we kind of get stuck in this mindset of this is how we've done things. This is what we do. This is how we handle POEM reporting. This is how we handle risk assessments. And sometimes it's a good idea to take a step back and take the holistic approach of looking at, hey, where are there steps in my process where I don't need a manual decision or a manual intervention point, and really look through, define those processes, define the data flows within your organization, and that's really going to help lend itself to being able to automate more quickly.
Very good. And this has come up over and over again. This is a process. When you said 12 to 18 months, first I thought you were going to say, I don't think we'll be there in 12 to 18 years. But top to bottom, people have talked about this is going to be a marathon, and automation isn't the only thing that agencies need to be focused on. As they're looking to leverage the tools they have, get the data in place, what are the other kind of core building blocks that you're urging your customers to focus on?
Yeah, and this has been mentioned a couple of times during the sessions today. One is, how are you going to protect what you don't know you need to protect? So, get an accurate inventory. Understand where your data is going. Document your data flows. Really get a good grasp on what you need to protect. And then at that point, you can make some better sound decisions on the types of tools you need, types of processes you need, and that's really a critical aspect to it.
And with that inventory, that also kind of takes us to other acronyms and buzzwords of the moment of CSCRM and the push for CMMC, and to bring better supply chain management. Is there a way to sort of get that bird with the same stone as well, or am I conflating too much?
There is. I mean, I think especially very familiar with the CMMC process and looking at vendors that have gone through a validation process. I don't think it's, again, I keep saying silver bullet. I don't think CMMC is a silver bullet on the vendors that you use or the software providers that you're going to use, but it's another validation point for you as an agency that I can treat this provider as more trustworthy, or this software as more trustworthy. It doesn't take away your ultimate responsibility to really understand what your risks are and what the risks are to the data that you're putting in these environments or putting in the software. But I think those frameworks, those certifications are definitely things that agencies need to consider when making software purchases, for sure.
And in terms of what agencies are working on now, you talked about some of the things you thought were good in the guidance. Is there any part of the zero trust journey that you wish was getting more emphasis right now, whether from individual agencies or from the OMBs and CISOs of the world?
I think focusing on the data is a big thing, because that's ultimately the end game here. It's not, hey, who can access this network or who can access this application? If the data is not sensitive, I don't care who accesses that data. So it's really, getting a grasp on what type of data you're storing in your systems, what type of data you're sending outside of your environment to other agencies or to cloud providers and the like. Really understand what the sensitivity of that data is, and then that will help you with determining what level of protections you want to put in place, because the protections are going to be different. It's publicly facing information that I'm storing in my internal systems. I'm not that concerned. If it's privacy data, if it's medical data, if it's wartime data, that's where I'm really gonna want to spend and put my true focus in.
Very good. There are follow-up questions I could ask there, but that would take us to a whole different workshop, so I'm going to leave it there. But Mike, thanks very much for being part of today's discussion. I appreciate the conversation.
Welcome. Thank you, Troy.